Hello and welcome to episode 25 of series 3 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from the Big Picture People. Just like to start by wishing you all a very happy festive season wherever you are and however you celebrate this time of year. I hope you have a peaceful and relaxing time and that we can start to move into 2023 with some sense of optimism. I think it's been a tricky year for all of us across the globe, 2022, so for some more than others, and obviously we're thinking of those who are in far more challenging situations than we find ourselves in various parts of the world. But I'm really looking forward to 2023, a lot of renewed optimism, I think, and hopefully things that we can start looking forward to. So this is the final show of the year and of this series, and we're going to be moving into the next series straight away. And on the 3rd of January 2023, we have our first episode of the new series, which is an interview with Mark Gallagher from Performance Insights, and he's going to be telling us all about the communications and leadership lessons from that highly intense world of motorsport. Mark has worked in motorsport for a number of years with some very prestigious people and teams, and is going to give us some insights into what it's like to lead and communicate within an organisation like a Formula One team. And I think you'll find that really interesting, even if Formula One isn't necessarily your thing. Following on from that, got a fantastic interview on the 17th of January with Joanna Parsons from Teamwork. Joanna is going to be telling us all about the challenges of communicating with remote employees. Now, it's a topic we've covered in previous episodes, particularly during the episodes during the pandemic. But this is definitely a topic that I think lots of people are interested in, and Joanna's got some fantastic insights based on her experience within the industry. Moving on from that, coming up, I'm not going to give you every episode, but we're going to be looking at topics such as the conscious workplace. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that, but we're going to be covering that in one of our episodes. We're going to be looking at trust and how that plays out in comms. We're going to be looking at civility and politeness in organizational communications, and we're also going to be revisiting stories and the importance of stories and the use of stories to build our narrative. So we've got some fantastic topics already lined up for the show in the new year. So just to move that into the sort of interview for today, just to say finally, we've got a number of our events. I'm not going to go through all of them. We've got a number of free webinars coming up next year for the Big Picture people. We are running webinars on our gamified solutions, which are very popular, and also our Big Picture products as well, our learning maps, which are very good for sharing organizational vision, values and direction. And particularly at the beginning of every year, we do get a lot of inquiries. Organizations tend to use our products to get them off to a flying start in the new year. So if any of you are interested in that, get in touch with us. But we're running webinars, as I said, on our events page at thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. If you go to our events page, you'll see that we run free webinars every month, alternating between the different topics that I've just mentioned. So that's it for me. So all the best for 2022, and I will go straight into today's interview. I really enjoy speaking to leaders of internal communications on the podcast and finding out about their career histories and some of the things that they've learned over that time. So we're very lucky today to have a guest with more than 18 years of experience in internal communications, who is going to share with us the experience of building their career within internal comms and starting off just as themselves, but then moving through to having now a team of 7 people serving 6,000 employees across the globe. During that journey, we're going to find out some of the tips of how they've built up a team, some of the challenges along the way, some of the key lessons from that journey, and also what we're going to do is find out about how the role of being a leader in internal communications can sometimes be quite a lonely role. There is often a dependency or an expectation on you to be the one who has all the answers, to have all the experience, to have all the knowledge. And we're going to, as part of that, we're going to explore the importance of building a really diverse and sustainable support network that can help you to bring some perspective to your work, and it can also be somebody or a group of people who can give you advice and mentor you, because even though you're a leader, you still need that help and support and advice. We're also going to talk about how the role of an IC leader can sometimes be very busy, very diverse days that we have, lots of things going on, and how we cope with those different demands and how we smooth over the water that sometimes is very turbulent within our organisations, given the volume of work and the expectations that are thrown at us. And finally, we're going to finish off by looking at some advice for anyone who's joining the profession, looking to join the profession, who's been in the IC profession for a while, and anyone who's just maybe newly started into the profession as well. We're going to look at 3 different pieces of advice that our guest is going to share with us as to how you can look to develop that support network and be really successful in your career. Okay, so that's what this interview is about for this episode. My guest today is Sarah Turton. Sarah is a trusted CIIC, Chartered Institute of Internal Communications, accredited communications and engagement leader with a formidable record of delivery extending across 18 plus years with one of the largest UK headquartered software companies. Sarah is curious, creative, and innovative by nature and demonstrates a can-do attitude and a genuine passion for the written word and all things culture and communication. So hello, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Craig. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, recovering from the dreaded COVID, as we were just talking about there, but definitely almost back to normal. I would say for 98%, which is 98% of my 100% usual 100%, which is I won't say how much of a percentage that is of normal people, but there you go. So anyway, Sarah, where are you in the world? Just for our listeners, we've got listeners all over the world. So position us on the map, please. Where is Sarah?
Sarah is in Wetherby, West Yorkshire, probably best known for its racecourse and Wetherby Whaler Fish and Chips. But I guess like most people around the world, I can adopt a hybrid approach. So I divide my time between home and the office, and my local office is in Leeds. But given where most of my peers are based, I spend a fair amount of my office time in the Midlands.
Okay, right. So yeah, excellent. So you're saying you're mainly virtual, but you move around.
Yeah.
I Wetherby, I always think of as the services because it's normally somewhere I pass. It's about halfway usually for me on my trips to the Midlands. Wetherby is a good sort of stopping off place. But yes, famous for many things, Wetherby.
Indeed.
Fantastic. So I introduced you as 18 years plus of one of the UK's largest headquartered software companies. That's incredibly vague. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about where you work, what you do, the type of work that you're involved in at the moment, please, Sarah?
Yeah, of course. So I should actually caveat that to say that we are the leading provider of software for the public sector across the UK and touch many points. We have a noble cause as an organisation. So maybe as a brand, we don't have the recognition, but certainly in terms of the things that we do every day, whether that be the democracy and engagement. So obviously those people voting for the UK elections, it's Civica behind obviously that, the highway signs and all the software that's delivering those to keep people safe. If you've got children, then the fingerprint technology that you use in schools to pay for meals, we're behind that. And when I say that we have, as an organisation, a noble cause, there is a broader theme behind that. So by children paying with a fingerprint, they don't necessarily know if a child is subsidised for their school meals, and therefore you could argue it prevents bullying and all those kind of things. So we have a really kind of broader noble cause in terms of the software that we do. As an organisation, we're a very innovative organisation, I guess, because we're in the software arena, and we obviously have loads of people across the world in APAC, Australia, so Singapore, the US, New Zealand, UK, and India, working together really to make life different for people and citizens around the world.
Fantastic. I always think it's amazing that these companies that kind of, I guess you'd say B2B companies who huge and do amazing things like you've just said there about your organization, and we work with a lot of companies like this, but yet from a consumer perspective, from it, like it's because you're not a B2C business, so that's obviously why that's the case. But people have generally never heard of, but actually without them, the kind of fabric of society and community wouldn't operate. So it's always
Indeed.
wonderful to unearth these hidden parts of our society. So fantastic. So yeah, I mean, and we're going to explore some of the challenges and the aspects of leading an internal comms function within such a large and complex organization, which you kind of made it sound wonderfully compact and unified there, which I'm sure it is. But my experience as we working in organizations is many different stakeholders that you have to serve, many internal, external stakeholders that you have to serve. It's always an interesting challenge, I think. So I'm really like to explore that with you. So I am. I'd like to sort of start by kind of talking about building an effective internal comms team. So you've got a lot of experience in the organization with you and a lot of experience in internal comms. And I think you set your team up from scratch, and now you've got this team that's effectively communicating or developing internal comms for up to 6,000 employees. So I'd really like to just explore that with you, because I think people who are in that early stages of their career, but also more experienced internal communicators who are experiencing growth in their team or want to develop their team and grow their team would always benefit from this. So could you just talk us through that journey that you've been on and some of the steps that you've been through and some of the lessons that you've taken along the way, please, Sarah?
I can indeed. So I guess I'd probably start by saying that many years ago, a colleague imparted some career advice that I've never forgotten. And they said, if you're offered an opportunity, Sarah, the chance to do something new, even if you don't think it's for you, you should take it. And I think my background, I started my career in marketing. I had a gap year at ICL in Slough. And then they offered me a job when I graduated. So I fell into marketing, and it was something I enjoyed studying and pursued for many, many years. And when I joined Civica, that is actually the role that I went into, a marketing role. But I think the reality is, as an organisation, we grew. When I joined, we're a very small organisation of a couple of hundred people. We didn't even have a HR team. But I think for me, obviously, we got a HR director on board, and I became the go-to person for everything that they needed to, I guess, make our culture tangible and bring lots of things to life, such as our training academy. And I kind of did that in addition to the marketing role. It was something I really embraced and enjoyed. And really, it was just then through chance, as the organisation grew, as we became an IIP accredited organisation, what you really then need is an established internal comm. So I think internal comms can be like marketing. A lot of people think they can do it. They endeavour to do it. But I think obviously it does need a dedicated resource as you move on within an organisation. And literally, I offered to do the role, put together a plan, and work with some obviously members of our exec to kind of put a plan in place. And I think for me, that was a fantastic opportunity, because whether you're in an organisation that doesn't currently have an IC function, and you're at the point where you think you need one, or you think you yourself can spot an opportunity, I think you have the luxury of a blank canvas when you set up an IC function. There's no shoes to fill, there's no processes to follow. You get to work with your CEO, your exec, your senior stakeholders, and shape the vision and standard and tone. And that, of course, they need to be really closely aligned to the organisation's strategy, values and brand. But you get also the privilege, I think, of building your team from scratch. So you're not inheriting anybody, and you can recruit people with the right mindset. Because I think for me, internal comms is a profession where you have to have a can-do attitude. You have to go the extra mile. You have to constantly have a smile on your face, because things will be dropped on you at the last minute by its very nature. But, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I'm sure many of you listening out there are too. And for me, there's nothing more rewarding or exciting about having a role in IC, in that, I could say I'm not just spinning the dinner service, there's the gravy boat as well. And I think, it really is such a challenging profession to be in. But I think, going to your point about, back in the day and kind of sharing some insights, I'd kind of love to say that I've got now about to share the internal comms startup success toolkit with details of an intricate 30-day plan and a full year plan and some measurable KPIs. But the reality is, I think back in the day when you're starting out, regardless of if you've been in internal comms previously or not, you're still getting familiar with an organisation in a different way.
Yeah.
I think for me, I started with a simple plan. I had the support of senior stakeholders, and I learned and adapted what I did as I went along. But I think a key thing for me was starting with the basics. I think it's very easy for us to overlook or overcomplicate and think we need some bold and wonderful strategy. But I think the key thing for me is time when you're setting up an internal comms function. And it's about really taking the time to listen, to observe, listen to the heartbeat of your organisation and deeply understand your business and your people, and especially your key stakeholders, because for me, that's key to internal comms success.
Yeah.
You need a really strong team, and you need really strong, passionate people around you who believe in what you're doing, but they're also comms advocates themselves, and they live and breathe that in their leadership style, but also fly the flag for you and can be your eyes and ears across the organisation. And I think you keep your people close. And when I say people, I don't just mean your team, because you know I had several years of no team, and that's therefore why the relationship, the time to take to listen to the heartbeat, as I say, of the organisation is so important in those early days, because you need to understand, believe in it, and follow it really to be able to communicate that effectively to your people, because you need to believe yourself in what you're communicating. Otherwise, I don't think that authenticity and genuineness comes across as well in what you're communicating.
And so of your 18 years, then how long of that period did you kind of operate without a team and kind of just get an idea of the timeline of when you
started? Probably about 2.5 years, to be honest.
You were kind of on your own.
Worked long days and long nights. But it was something I was incredibly passionate about. And I remember at the time, probably I went off on maternity leave and then came back, and 2 years later my husband and I separated, which was fine. It was my choice. It's actually something that's, I think, a positive for my life, but I really felt I needed a purpose, and I absolutely threw myself into my career. And I was lucky that the organisation I worked for, we have a culture where you're very empowered to be your best, and I think I'm testament to that, in the sense of close relationship with HR director, talked about the art of the possible, and then it was kind of like, well, off you go and you do that then. So my background was marketing. It's fundamentally, you just need the ability to communicate, so you don't necessarily need a piece of paper to make you up to the job. No. But I think there was you become a master of so many things, I think, and it's a real privilege to be able to set up a function. And as I say, someone at the time even said to me, "You'll never make a full-time job of that, Sarah." And 10 years on, I'm really proud to look back and think, well, I actually did make it a full-time job, and there's another 6 of us around the world, all doing the same thing. So yeah.
You've answered that question. I was going to ask how big your team is now. You've got 6 people working for you across the world.
Yes, so we're a total team of 7. So 4 in the UK, 2 in India, and 1 in Australia.
Okay, excellent. And you kind of alluded to this, and in terms of how much did you have to kind of prove? I guess we always need to prove the worth of what we do, but how much of it did you was a kind of convincing job that I need more resources, because with more resources I can deliver X, Y, and Z, and how much of it were you kind of pushing against an open door in terms of, an organization and leadership who kind of recognized the value of what you're doing? I mean, how did that evolve in terms of getting that sponsorship and that challenge of getting the kind of the headcount that you need to be able to do what you're doing now? How did you manage that, and what were some of the challenges along the way that you faced with that?
I think first and foremost, I was believed in, or the function, the value of the function, even though back 10 years ago, I don't think internal comms had the exposure and kudos and respect that it has today. And I think absolutely, I'm not alone in thinking COVID's absolutely brought our profession to the fore in terms of the value add. I think for me, obviously, there was a belief in the value of the function and the role, because otherwise I wouldn't have been offered that opportunity to do it in the first place. I think with anything, you do need to prove yourself. And so, yeah, I think it was just a point where the senior stakeholders recognised as much as I did that I needed that extra support to grow, because as an organisation we were going through real growth. And so therefore you obviously need the additional resource to be able to do that. But I think as well, I don't want to undermine in any way what I've created, but as I said, there wasn't this beautifully crafted 30-day plan.
No.
It was very much an evolution, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, even in today's world where, there's so many tools and assets out there and systems that you can use to give you more of a plan. But I think it was very organic. I think obviously I am very much somebody who delivers on my promise, and I think those kind of ethos should be really true to you as you're starting up a function, in terms of proving your value. But it is no different to any other profession. It's about earning that respect. And I think if there's no pain and grit in the story, then it actually, if I'd have probably had a team of 5 people to start the function with this wonderful crafted plan, it wouldn't have actually give the story so much grit. I think we all need a bit of a journey. But I think, I've been very fortunate that I've always had that support and belief. And a lot of those people in those senior positions have been, advocating, would often say, you need to speak to Sarah about this. So I think, there was a real traction and shift in the deliverables. It's very tangible, I think, what we do too as a profession. So you sit at the centre of the organisation, you can tangibly see what you're delivering. And I think then on the back of that, it got to the point where it was deemed to be successful. And also at that point, I was asked to also look after our brand, eventually PR and our M&A. So some of our growth is through acquisition. So ensuring that people were onboarded effectively and culturally they were onboarded. So back in the day, I used to sit within marketing. So I didn't have for many years a traditional role. So my team was actually a couple of people bigger than it is currently, because I looked after those extra elements. But I think that in itself to me was testament that the value had been seen in the internal comms, because it was almost like, can you replicate that now for these other areas? And can you take that extra responsibility? So I think not every organisation is the same. You will get your cynics, and I said about a colleague at the time when I started out that was really quite negative in terms of their thought process. Been called glitter and glue in the past. But actually embrace all that as a positive, right? Because as Eddie Eagle would say, I love nothing more than proving people wrong. And, we're all motivated very differently. But I think it's great if you have those cynics and those people that don't believe in you to just get your head down quietly and deliver.
Fantastic. And I want to go on to talk about another key aspect, I think, of leading any function, and particularly IC, which is this whole sense that, and I've worked with lots of leaders, and I guess when they're working with someone like me, they tend to confide it or kind of share their own personal vulnerabilities, which I always totally respect, and because we're all human at the end of the day. And one of the things is around the kind of loneliness of being a leader, and particularly when you're leading a function. Any function, but particularly in the context of internal comms. So, and I know you'd kind of volunteered to this when we'd kind of spoken before we recorded the interview a few weeks ago, and you'd said this was something that you're kind of happy to talk about. So, you just tell me a little bit about from your perspective, because I'm totally with you on this. I think it's really it is something that we often forget. We kind of look at the people stood in front of us and think that they're invulnerable and got it bulletproof, but actually they're as vulnerable as we are at the end of the day. So tell us a little bit about that and your experiences, please, Sarah.
Of course. I guess in the early days when it's literally just you, like it was for me, you're just on your own, then you can be working those silly hours, obviously through choice, but there's no one to share the pressure and responsibility with, and no one who truly gets it. I guess with whom as well you can share the highs and lows, because I think an important thing in everything that you're doing is always taking those moments to really reflect and recognise and celebrate your success. So I think for me, as I say, no one genuinely understands. And it's the time it takes to really craft and deliver a message that not only resonates with your audience and gets them engaged, but has the right tone. And I think now, so in terms of the world we live in, is fully inclusive and it lands as it's intended. So I think, you know, as I say, when you're starting out and you're on your own, there's no one that truly gets it. As you then have the joy of establishing a team, that for me is really important, because what you need is a really strong team around you that will go the extra mile, will have the can-do attitude. But again, there's times when you can't always share. So it's not about your ability to delegate, but, you know, obviously there are times when you're privy to really sensitive information. And maybe as well, also, you just have some knowledge and experience that you can't easily offload to your team members. So I suppose in those instances, it feels like it's just on you. And then obviously in things like crisis communications, as thrilling and as exciting as it can be to have pulled into conference calls with your CEO and exec team, you know, as you're kind of stocking up on the toilet paper as you're about to get the announcement to go into lockdown, you know, you kind of feel that you're really there at the end of it, and exciting things to come in terms of making a real difference, and providing a reassuring voice in uncertain times. But again, people look to you, you know, and as you started to say at the beginning, Craig, you know, we're all human, none of us are different. But I think when you're in the IC profession, there is an element of composure that you need to maintain. You can't be seen to be flapping, and you know, you have to be armed with endless band-aids to stick over things and make things seem, you know, really polished and smooth and okay. But I think even when you have a team, as I say, sometimes they can't be privy to that information. So it is down to you. But also as well, we all have our limits, regardless of how well we are at managing stress and balancing multiple things. You know, you can take then also the strain for your team in those moments where it is full on and high pressure. But then again, who then do you put your kind of pressure and have your moments with? And I'm sure I'm not alone in having work wives and husbands throughout the organisation. So as much as I don't have a counterpart, if I was a sales director, you know, we've got a community of sales directors, but there isn't an equivalent of me in the organisation. But I do have, you know, various wives and husbands at various levels within the organisation that, you know, are there to just check in with, act as a sounding board. And they might not get the challenges of the profession, but, you know, that they're there to sense check and, you know, make you feel supported, which is definitely one way I would recommend that you overcome that loneliness. But I think, all professions, all leadership roles have it. It goes with the territory, I think. So it's either something that you embrace and you just focus on getting over, or you allow it to pull you down. But I think, it should always be the former in terms of, just stepping up and embracing it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've done some work with a client of ours on helping them develop some tools around resilience, and it's interesting because we did some research ourselves into other people's research on resilience, and you know, one of the recurring themes is that resilient people tend to have a really good network of people around them who they can you know, use for support. And we kind of summarize the type of support that anybody needs, you know, regardless of whatever role they're in, and particularly when they're in a role which can be lonely, like what we've just been talking about. And we kind of talk about that you need and this comes from a good friend of mine as well. He kind of shared this with me. You need I'm trying to remember this. You need a kind of moral support. So you need someone who you can just go and have a good rant and a moan to, and they just kind of listen and don't kind of judge, and they're just sort of there to sort of absorb it like a sponge. You need someone who's kind of can give you tactical support, which is kind of when you're trying to do something you don't really know how to do, but you know somebody who's really good at that, or kind of could give you the, you know, so it's like, you know, I don't know how to do this with Excel, or, you know, I don't know how to do this with this person who's, you know, kind of difficult, and I don't know how to approach the conversation, you know. So people who are good at that sort of thing, you go to for that sort of specific, very tactical advice, and then you need the kind of truth teller, which is someone who will kind of hold your feet to the fire and sort of say,
Mhm.
look, what are you doing? What I've told you what I think you should be doing, and you're not listening clearly because you're still doing what you said you weren't going to do. And who's kind of, and I think there are many other types of support, but I think recognizing that you need at least those three types of support. And I like your kind of work husband, work wife analogy, because it's often, our nearest and dearest who try and do all of that
Yeah.
for us, and they're not always very good at doing that because they don't really know the context that we're talking about. So I think it's a really important lesson for me coming out of this, which is, it is, if you're working in any role, regardless of whether you're
Mhm.
senior or junior, but particularly I think the more senior you get, that you need that kind of support network. You can't do it all on your own, and if you do, you're often, you kind of, you're going to come a cropper at some point. That's my experience anyway.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that kind of follows, that links to what I was going to ask the next question I was asking, because I know the other thing that you bought from your loneliness of leadership, and now the new one that you've kind of given us there, which I really like, the work wife, work husband. Is this idea of being a swan, which I guess, I'm sure people know what the metaphor, but I'll let you explain it. Why sometimes being an IC leader is a bit like being a swan, a day in the life of a swan and a day in the life of an IC leader. And again, anything that we've not already talked about, how you can kind of cope with those demands as an IC leader. So I'll let you explain the swan analogy, just in case nobody's
Okay.
familiar with it. So
Okay, so I mean, I just want to start by obviously saying that to be a comms professional for me personally, and I'm sure I'm not alone, it is a very privileged position because, as
yeah,
I said before, you're at the heart of the business, but you have a great deal of exposure and profile, which is great, but it also, in some respects, can make you quite vulnerable.
yeah,
And if you're not careful, you can kind of become the victim of your own success. But I think what I would say is it's a really trusted profession, and people put their trust in you to deliver and buy
yeah,
into what you're communicating.
yeah,
And so, despite all of that pressure, you have the real responsibility to remain calm. So, yes, you have to be a swan. So you make it look effortless, but
yeah,
by demonstrating that serenity, I guess, of a swan, people, I think, can sometimes underestimate how fast those legs are going
yeah,
underneath the surface and what's actually involved, and therefore can underestimate the time and effort that goes into what you do, and maybe just drop things on you last minute and think, oh, well, you can just write a communication in half an hour. And you can, but it's the quality of that. And, you've built up a reputation, and depending on what you're communicating, as I said, before, you need to make sure it lands as it's intended. And, it takes a little bit of thought. So I think for me, there's lots of juggling going on.
yeah,
And I think particularly, I am probably my worst critic. But I think you're in a comms profession, so therefore everything you do, so even a simple email that I will send to somebody, I'll still read it again. I'll still start it with good morning, did you have a nice weekend, regardless of how busy I am, because I'm in the comms profession, and rightly or wrongly, and I'm sure people aren't, but I feel judged in
yeah,
everything that I do. So it's like being an accountant and not being able to add up. It's the basic fundamental. So I think for me, to be able to cope with all that as the swan, is you absolutely need a really good, strong team around you. As I said from the outset, your team, again, another thing that someone said to me very early on in my career as I was starting to build a team is, you've been very successful. You've built this on your own, but now your future success will come through your team.
yeah,
And it's true, because as
yeah,
you're part of an organization that grows, you can't be over everything. And, now more so than ever, I'm getting to the point where I can't physically read every communication we send out. So I
yeah,
have to absolutely trust. And I think in terms of reviewing content, I would always say to my team, it's not because I don't trust you, because I absolutely do trust my team, and we have an incredibly close and open relationship. But if I didn't read it, I wouldn't probably have always the time to read it. But also, you need that visibility, because if anyone asks you at any point in time what comms are going out, what's going on in the business, you need to know, again, coming back to my point, as leading by example.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, it's so full on. My comms team don't just deal with the internal comms. We also look after our listening strategy. So our annual engagement survey, EMPS survey, pulse surveys. And we also run 2 really big events for the business, which is our annual kickoff conference for our sales community and annual awards program. So I don't know how typical that is with some organizations. I know some internal comms teams are just communications and nothing else, but there's a lot of broader things, and particularly as we sit now within our P&OD team, which is our people and organisation development team, or to most people a HR team, we can often find ourselves brought into lots of other things as well, which is great because it means there's never a dull moment. But I just think the nature of our role is being the swan. We have to be composed. If someone wants to change their slides 10 minutes before you're about to start a conference, you have to have a smile on your face and you just have to make it happen. So it's just the nature of what you do. And I think it's not everyone's cup of tea. You either love it or you hate it. And I've had just a couple of people join me over the years and not stand the test of time because they didn't like the pace of it, which again is why, like any job, I think you just need to love what you do, be very passionate about it and live it and breathe it, because this is not a profession that's 9 to 5 and that you can just package in a box. It is all encompassing. It's full on.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you on that. I think it is one of those things where there is no blueprint. There's no kind of you get the book out and read how to do it, because a lot of the time it's novel stuff that you're doing, or it's a novel application of what you already do. And like you say, with a lot of IC teams now being part of broader organization development HR teams, there's a kind of a sense of, well, you're good at this sort of stuff, aren't you? We'll give you that to do, and it's actually something you've never done before, but actually you are probably the most qualified to do it within the organization. But it doesn't mean it's any easier, because it's something you're gonna have to kind of either invent from scratch or do a lot of kind of digging around to find out other ways that we could do it, and not having to necessarily reinvent the wheel. So I agree, it's not for everybody, but if you like that sort of thing and you're resourceful,
it's absolutely the job to have.
It's absolutely, I want to just build on that and just sort of go on to the sort of final area that I'd like to explore with you, Sarah. And I know you kind of being on the interview and being on the show, part of your involvement in the IOIC and your passion for advocating this profession to for the people who it's right for. And and do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment with our, what your involvement with IOIC is? Because I know you're kind of involved in IOIC and also the Chartered Institute of Internal Comms as well. Do you want to say a little bit about what you're up to, and also any other advice that you've got for people who are looking to join the profession?
Okay. I think the first thing I would say is, obviously, I reached out first, so I'm a member of the IOIC. So if you're wanting to get into space, absolutely advocate that you obviously do consider joining and becoming a member, because there's lots of great tools and resources available to you as part of your membership. But as part of that, for my own personal growth, the reality is you can't always just look within your organisation. I think with internal comms, you can't afford either to stand still, because your business will be growing, the needs of the business will be growing. I think the demographic of your people continues to evolve, and people want information in very different ways now, almost on their timescales, and in kind of indigestible formats as well. So I think you need to keep listening, and I think it's very easy to become blinkered, and you can't just keep reeling out the same thing on repeat because you did it 3 years ago and it was working 3 years ago. You need to keep sense checking, is that right for the business? So I think to do that, that's where your external network is particularly powerful. So again, in terms of LinkedIn, so as I say, obviously member of the IOIC, and as part of that, I wanted an external coach. So I've had coaches and mentors internally, and with kind of external partners that we've used over the years to kind of grow my voice of authority and all those kind of bits and pieces as you kind of go up through the ranks. But I got a coach through the IOIC, and it was actually them that kind of suggested about the advisory board. So it's something that was set up several months back. It's a number of comms professionals across the country from different sectors that basically come together on a regular basis to think about and discuss the themes and topics that are important to comms professionals, for their Voice magazine, which is their quarterly magazine, which is a great magazine. And that's my involvement with that. And it's been great, because it's nice to know too that you're not alone in your thoughts. And you don't, sometimes it's very easy as well to think that other organizations have got these super magic wands in terms of systems and things that allow them to get all the data and dashboards and analytics around comms as well. But the reality is it's not all that it's painted to be. So it's reassuring to know that you're not alone in terms of your thought processes. So I'm really glad that I've done both of those. And again, I guess obviously there's not loads of places on the advisory board, but I think membership of the IOC is definitely something people should look to pursue.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, and I like that, because I do because I'm in my own small business, I do mentoring for other small business owners, and again, I think why I really like it, everybody says, oh, it's really, how do you find the time to do it? It must be like, really altruistic, but actually, I mean, it is, but at the same time, I often find I learn so many great things that I could actually, because from the other people who are either mentoring or just actually thinking, you know what, I should actually listen to my own advice here, because I should be, sort of practicing what I preach to a certain extent, and actually it just, like you say, it's just that it just gives you that diversity of thinking, and actually you recognize that there's an element of relief, isn't there, that I'm glad it's not just me who sort of finds this a really a challenge, and the ability, and again it goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is the importance of support networks and the people you can talk to and be honest and straightforward, and absolutely. So I love that. Any final tips, Sarah? Any final, if someone either there, and this might be kind of linking in with what you've just been talking about there about your advisory role business work, but anybody who's looking to move into IC, or has just started in IC, or has been in IC for let's maybe pick those three different kind of little personas there, just thinking about stepping into the profession, being in the profession for a year or two, or been in there for a sort of coming up to the sort of the length of service that you've got in the profession. What any single piece of advice for those three different kind of personas?
Okay, so for somebody who's not in the profession and thinking about it, I'd say absolutely go for it, because what is there to lose? A favourite book of mine is Susan Jeffers' Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And the reality is, what have you got to lose? I think ultimately it helps if you've got a network or you're already in an organisation, so your credibility and personal brand can do some of the talking for you. But particularly if you've been in a profession that's very content heavy, so something like marketing, journalism, anything that shows your ability to communicate, and it's a field you want to get into, I'd say absolutely embrace it, and just go for it, because you've got nothing to lose. And I think, as I said earlier on, the profession has really elevated recently. I think there's lots of opportunities and roles out there, so give it a go. I think the second persona, just correct me, Craig,
if you've been in the industry for like a year or two, and you're still early stages and finding your feet and working out what I should be doing and what it actually means and involves.
Okay, so my piece of advice for that would be to look broader and think about externally your network to kind of get that insight into what other organisations and best practice looks like, and take the time to put something together in terms of a plan or a proposal in terms of how you can take the organisation's communications, depending on what level you are, to the next level. I think don't be shy to have ideas and put them on the table. And if again, very lucky that we have always had a really open culture. And even when I was much junior, I still used to speak to the CEO. I didn't, I wouldn't have thought twice about sending an email or picking up the phone, just because of the type of company we are. I appreciate not every organisation has that. So if you don't have somebody at that level that you think you can go have a conversation with and share your ideas, then find someone else that's maybe not quite at that level, but is still senior and could help open the door for you by bringing them on board with your thinking. And then in terms of the third persona, Craig?
which is kind of like, I guess, you, someone who's been in the
Me.
profession for a long time, so this is kind of advice to yourself, I guess. This is very,
Yeah. My
yeah.
advice to myself is to just keep on your toes and don't be complacent.
Mm,
And I think just continue enjoying and embracing it.
mm,
Because I think, as I say, it's not a profession where you can let yourself become stale. And I think, yeah, that is the key thing, to just keep on the front foot, keep thinking, keep evolving. But more than anything, just love what you do.
mm.
Because I think naturally, if you do, then you'll be your best self, and you'll do the best for the role. Just live and breathe it.
Superb. Excellent. Well, that's a fantastic point at which to finish my questions. So just before we wrap up, where can we find out more about you? I know you talked about LinkedIn. Is that the best place if people want to, anyone wants to reach
so
out?
obviously I'm on LinkedIn, and if anyone wants to reach out, or even particularly if you're in the Yorkshire area and want to create a small network, I'm part of a HR network where we regularly, every couple of months, just dial into a call and share kind of topics and issues. Just to have that kind of support. More than happy to help set up something of that nature as well, if that's at all helpful.
Fantastic. Oh, that's very kind, Sarah. And I'll put the link into your LinkedIn profile into the show notes. So if anyone's listening to this and they want to find your profile, they can find it by clicking on the link there. And so all that remains to be said, Sarah, is thank you very much for your sharing your fantastic insights, your experience, and your generosity comes across in huge amounts there in terms of everything you've said, and some very, very wise advice. I think, definitely for internal communicators, but some really good advice, I think, for anyone who's, in any sort of leadership role as well, is that sort of that ability to recognize you can't do it all on your own, and you do need to have a support network, but also you need to trust the people who are doing the job when you're leading them, and not micromanage them, but also have a grip on what's going on as well. It's that tricky balance that you have to find, isn't it, when you're in that role? So
It is indeed.
yeah, so brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I
No,
really
thank you. It's been
appreciate
an
it.
absolute pleasure, and I hope plenty of people listen to this and it helps at least one person along the way. Then it's done its job.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. If you've got any ideas for episodes you'd like us to cover in future, you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can use the feedback form at engagingic.com. If you're not already subscribed to the show via your podcast platform, please do so. And if you could leave a review for us, that would be absolutely fantastic. We have links to other episodes at engagingic.com. All of our previous episodes are available there. And if you're interested in our visual communication services, our big pictures, our learning maps, our explainer videos, and also our live graphic recording, please get in touch with us again at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. Thank you.